Hello, everybody. My name is Kyle, and this is the Conservative Take Live, where we take topics, normally about three, and talk about uh, events that have been going on. And it's been a while since we've done this, and I guess since the election, this is probably the first one we've done. And there's actually mitigating reasons for that, which I may discuss at some point. However, today is the week of the 21st of February, and we're going to talk about some topics that are pretty interesting. We have a guest this week, and her name is Jackie. She's been on here before. I'm going to drop her in here in a second here, but I want to just first welcome everyone here who's first time here to this channel. We welcome you. Again, if you haven't been on here, we take topics of TV, culture, politics, anything in the news, particularly dealing with identity politics and dealing with things that just are not things that I, as an American, have grown up with. I mean, and how this country's changed, where we're seeing a lot of identity politics in society. We're seeing a lot of things that are just not what I would consider and what many people would consider American. And we can talk about that going forward. So that's what this channel is all about. And this is a live stream, and we're going to be on here. Who knows how long we're going to be on here? Typically about an hour, but we'll let Jackie decide that. And I'm going to let her talk about it because we've spoken with this and before this, and she has some really, really interesting topics that she wants to talk about. And I want to bring her on here right now. And
hey,
and Jackie, I'm going to get you on here first. How are you doing today, Jackie?
I'm just sitting here trying not to be too white. That's what I'm doing. I'm trying hard. And I don't know how you're operating this whole thing as a Black person that doesn't know how to find the internet or how to operate within the internet, as our president pointed out. So I guess we're both lucky.
You know what? That's actually a pretty good dichotomy there. In fact, it's really the main topic right now is, well, I mean, with our president. I mean, and if you don't know what she's talking about, what Jackie's referring to a town hall that Biden had where he essentially said that people of Hispanic, African-American descent or communities don't have the ability to really get on the internet to, I don't know what it was he was trying to get there.
But it was to find places to get the vaccine. They don't have the internet in Black communities.
So that's the context. And what I was telling my wife was, well, you know, just about everybody I know, no matter how poor or rich they are, they have a cell phone and they have a smartphone. And every one of those things get on the internet.
True facts. But I mean, I don't even find him offensive because he's so dumb. I mean, he's so dumb. You know, it's offensive, but it's what else is new? Joe Biden has been offending people for many years. He's not going to change. I don't know about you, but I'll bet a lot of people of your listeners too. Like, we just can't be mad all the time anymore. You know, we have to live our lives. For instance, Ben Shapiro is one of my favorites. I probably agree with him on almost everything. But every time I watch this podcast, 20 minutes into it, I'm ready to go into a rage and sweep the table. So I'm just trying to be more chill, find more humor, still be determined. We got to be determined. There's a lot of work to be done, but you just can't be enraged all the time.
Right. That is right. And I would agree. And I would say that I've been enraged pretty much for the past 6 months, for the most part, leading up to the election, during the election, after the election. And I was at your house doing the live stream. And as you know, for those who are following me, I was tweeting about every 15, 16 seconds of what was happening around the country. And then because this is YouTube, I can't get into certain topics without being demoted and demonetized, which his channel was demoted and demonetized for a while there, which I will say on YouTube's behalf, it was not their fault. It was actually my fault. It's a paperwork scenario. I thought I was demonetized for anything like that, but it wasn't. But they will still take your channel down if you do certain things that don't fall within their community guidelines. Meaning, if you say that the election was a certain way and went a certain way, then they can just come in here and take you. Now, I will have other avenues we'll be on Rumble. We're going to be on BitChute and a few other channels, systems. But for now on YouTube, we're just keeping that confines. But that night of the election, as you know, once the New York Times stopped those tickers, I knew it was over because Trump was winning every single election at that moment. And at that point there, my rage continued on till probably till today.
Yeah, I was going to say, what time is it now? 10 minutes ago.
Right.
But you know what? Angry people make poor choices, and you can't stay focused on work that needs to be done. And I would like to enjoy life. I mean, every day another executive order seems to have the potential to make our lives less enjoyable. So let's just enjoy what we have right now, and stay focused. I mean, the one good thing, and there's just so many topics. I don't want to digress too much, but the things that are going on, I think even. Let's face it, most people that were called left 5 years ago would now almost be called right by the progressive left. You know what I'm saying? Like the center between right and left has shifted so far over. And I know there's a lot of people and then maybe they even voted for Biden and they're just shaking their head. I mean, look at gasoline. Right. Gasoline alone has gone up like 60 cents, I think, since the election. And then the pipeline, and there's just so many things that even regular people, and I believe most of America is regular people. That's another thing. I mean, let's face it. The media has to have a day of reckoning. They are really and truly inflaming and driving people apart. They find every single thing that's going to outrage either the right or the left, and they manage to print it and focus on it. And most of us live in the regular world. We don't live in crazy town. So I think that, you just got to limit your media, limit your own access to the news, choose wisely on that. I've been putting my TV on a regular channel in probably a year anyway, and now I never will. And, you just got to focus on the good stuff. Who knows what's going to happen? After everything that happened in the last 6 months, I really wouldn't be surprised if Martians landed and took over.
Well, one thing I'm seeing I will miss a light at the end of the tunnel, because looking through, when you're in the fog of war, as things are going down, you don't know what tomorrow's going to hold. And I'm beginning to see the makings of something really fantastic coming out of this. And part of that comes from the fact that the left is just falling all over themselves. And, their hatred for Trump and their hatred for everything that he stands for, which really, by the way, isn't really about Trump. It's about what he stands for. Because if Trump was personified by any other person outside of him, he or she, for that matter, would be just as popular, right? But the fact that he personified that movement, which started way back with Ross Perot, a little bit with Forbes back in the day, with this populist movement, going back to Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, if you really want to get clear on this, or even Andrew Jackson, if I really want to be really, this populist movement where pragmatism, common sense comes into play, and America first, that's something that's very American. And Trump personified that in a time when the world didn't seem like it wanted to go that direction. Everything was globalism. Everything was open borders. And here you had this person talking common sense at a language that everyone can understand.
I agree. And I think anybody that imitates him, I'm very focused on Ron DeSantis right now. And Ron DeSantis is a Harvard graduate. He was a brilliant guy. He was a JAG attorney.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're smart people. And people like Ron, it gives me a lot of cheer when I hear him that he wants to take on big tech. I get even he lowered the flags to half mast in Florida, half mast for Rush Limbaugh. He's one of our guys, and I really think that if he teamed up with Trump, I think that team would be unstoppable, because I think Ron DeSantis would balance out. Some people that think that Trump's a little too, he can be retaliatory when he gets angry. Nobody's as entertaining as Trump. He is the most entertaining president. And I know a lot of people on the left that'll say the same thing. He's hilarious. He's entertaining. He has energy, more energy than probably you and I put together. And he's great. I think that Ron DeSantis also has a lot of gravitas. And certainly he managed Florida in an amazing way. Not as good as Cuomo did, of course, managed New York, but still, Ron DeSantis, he's a pretty good guy. But let's New York. Holy moly. Did you get a chance to look at that clip of de Blasio?
I tried to pull the video down. I was not able to do that. You want to walk us through, this is talk dealing with the arts and dealing with him bringing back the arts. Now, he did something a couple months ago. Was that what you're referring to? Was something that was more recent?
No, he tweeted out so the city of New York, it was 3 days ago, I believe, or maybe it was 5, but they tweeted out a video. So, I mean, just what the landscape is in New York right now. New York suffered such a great deal. They were very locked down. I think they continue. I think they might have opened indoor dining Valentine's Day, but everyone's out of work. I mean, it's really, really bad. Thousands of restaurants and other businesses have closed. They just got killed. They got killed. And of course, the Target and the Walmart and all the big businesses were open. All the mom and pops shut for months and months. So that's the backdrop. And then you have Cuomo's lawsuit with the nursing home patients. All that's in the backdrop. And that brilliant mayor was outside with these people dressed in black, like black bodysuits, performing an interpretive dance while he announced they were going to have pop-up dance and slam poetry and things like that all over the city that was going to bring back New York. The interpretive dance is going to bring back New York City from the collapse. I forget the number, but people are fleeing New York. I mean, California is the only other state where they're leaving quite, so quickly. We already know how broke they are. They're going to raise the taxes. I saw a figure. It's an amazing amount of people that pay most of the taxes in New York City. It's a very small percentage, but they're very, very wealthy. And they really support New York City, and they're leaving. I can't remember. One of the bigger brokerage firms just moved to Florida. I'm sure now the Wall Street Stock Exchange is threatening to move because they're going to put a new tax on trades. Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, how much more offensive can you be?
Yeah, and it's almost like a very amount of a delusionalism that people like him has. I don't know if it's narcissism, is it just incompetence, or is it all the above? I mean, one thing about art and expression that comes out of abundance. It comes out of yes, exactly. So if you're having art that's depressive, you have stuff like the blues, right? Stuff like or Negro spirituals. Right, those are out of things that are depressing, and it comes out in the lyrics. Even some rap music but he's trying to do. It sounds like to me that this was a very uplifting type of art that he's trying to push forth in a time which wasn't much the same way.
No, right? Nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that right now. And it's like all like interpretive, experimental art. I'm not even talking about Broadway shows. I'm talking about people dressed in black bodysuits doing the dances. Nobody wants to see that crap. They're trying to eat. And the kids aren't in school either. Who doesn't love slam poetry pop-up? I mean, come on. Like, how disconnected could you possibly be? It reminds you of when he painted Black Lives Matter. And your friend Beverly was up there trying to cover it up. Was she in New York or was she in Washington, D.C. when she tried to cover that painting?
That was in New York.
Right.
That was in New York. That was in New York.
He's out there and they're painting on the street without following any of the protocols, by the way, that you have to follow to paint something on the street. And it's like who was fiddling while Rome was burning? Nero. His ego. Nero. Yeah. His ego is so insanely huge. Him and Cuomo. I don't think they could be in the same room because both their heads are so doggone big. Out of touch with reality.
So what's the deal? What's the figures on the amount of elderly who have passed in New York?
Well, they think that it's actually doubled. Like they think as many as 50,000 more died in nursing homes.
50,000. And
I know. So here's the thing. He's trying. First of all, I guess you might have heard. It almost sounds like a mafia movie where he was calling people up saying, "I'll ruin you if you if you tell. I'll destroy you." He called other politicians up. And one of them, the wife could hear him screaming at her husband. Cuomo was screaming at her husband, and the wife could hear across the room, "I'll destroy you. I will destroy you if you talk about this." Like, how bizarre. So the situation was this. And I remember I was in New York at the time. And as you know, maybe you don't know, I work in a business that's associated with nursing homes. And I remember quite clearly what happened. And everybody was under a horrible, horrible strain. People were passing away. And if you send someone to the hospital, You didn't want to take them back because no one even knew like exactly how the virus was being transmitted exactly. There was a lot of PPE shortages. Right. You couldn't get tests. So, and the ship and the Javits Center had empty beds. There was no reason in the world not to send the patients there. And what I believe is because Trump arranged that ship, that Mercy ship. And if you remember, Franklin Graham had tents in Central Park. And I believe that Cuomo did not want to use Trump's ship and did not want to use the Javits Center because that was also Trump supplied beds, hospital equipment, staff. So that's why the patients went back to the nursing home. And I know some people that tried calling the Department of Health. They didn't even answer the phone. The phone would just ring and ring and ring and ring.
So when that was happening, I remember when the merchant ship was empty, we were actually saying the narrative on the right was that this was not a big deal because obviously if it was a big deal, they'd be using the ships. It sounds like to me, it obviously was a big deal, but it wasn't being utilized for political reasons.
Absolutely. I mean, he didn't say that. That's what I think. And now I saw Cuomo did a live bit with the press corps. He loves to do that. And by the way, at the time when I was in New York, we watched Cuomo every day. And he was talking about how I remember quite clearly, somebody must have complimented it. And people thought he was doing a good job because he seemed so authoritative and calm and doing these briefings every day, coming to the public. And I remember when he said he would like to manage COVID nationally. He said he wanted to go to like Los Angeles and go to other major cities and help them manage COVID. Like, what an ego. What an ego. Every day he came on TV. It seemed like he really kind of enjoyed having that FaceTime with the camera. What a psycho.
Yeah. The mayor of New York City is one of the most powerful people in the country. It's if you I don't even know much about city management, but there's essentially two types of mayors in this country. There's the big mayor, and then there's like a mayor that leads by the city council and the city manager. Smallest towns have that sort of thing, but the towns like Chicago and New York, they have these big mayors. They pretty much can run the show any way they feel like it, and I think that power can really become intoxicating for them. And when you have a climate like Trump out there, who you don't like and disdain, and you're trying to do everything in contrary to him. Well, then along the ego, then you can make some horrible decisions with some horrible ramifications.
Absolutely. And by the way, a lot of people that Cuomo had on his team quit or left because he wasn't listening to their his pandemic management team. Left because he wasn't listening. He's cuckoo. Remember when, and I think this was right before the pandemic, de Blasio had gone out to Iowa or someplace because he was thinking he was going to run for president. Do you remember that? Bill de Blasio.
Yes, I do remember that.
So what a disconnect. And this is the fault, and this is what I was talking about with you earlier. The turnout for New York City elections is ridiculous. That's how you get, remember when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, when she got elected, everybody was shocked because I think it was another Democrat had that post for so long because nobody was paying attention. No one pays attention. No one turns out for elections. And this is what you get. You get like nincompoops like de Blasio, who I remember another big initiative. So everybody, this is what drives me crazy. The government, the national government's broke. Everybody's broke. He rolls out like a pre-K. There's no funds, my friend. There's no funds. Like, yes, I would like to do a lot of social programs, but I'm already taxed as much as I could possibly be. And you're trying to have all these pie in the sky social programs, but you don't have the money to keep the water running and the electricity on. And he is a big one for that.
Yeah, I don't want to jump away from you. I want to post this comment.
No, we'll get to questions. That's good.
We'll get to this in a second because this is part of our docket for tonight. I want to make sure we don't lose sight of this question. So I want to put it up there for now, but we'll get back to that. The short answer to that question is, my understanding is happening tomorrow. They're going to make a determination on that. And we can talk about that when we get through the de Blasio and the Coca-Cola scenario. But Yeah, and to me, Jackie, the biggest thing right now is our focus should be on voter integrity, because otherwise, if you can't have valid elections, and you mentioned it with de Blasio and AOC, what do you have? You know?
I just want to tell you, I looked it up. De Blasio won the last election with 14% turnout of New York City residents. 14. That's like all the union. That was the teachers union, and it wasn't the cops because they hate them. I don't know. Another Democratic union.
And see, mayors, their elections are on the odd number year, right?
Yes, it wasn't the same as the presidential.
Yeah. So you have a way low turnout on those anyway. So
right.
Wow. So let me ask you this question quickly. Since we're on de Blasio, you lived in New York for a long time, and so let me ask you this question about him in terms of the lawsuit. Do we think anything will happen out of that? Do you think there will be any charges or anything made
For
out of that? Or do you
Cuomo?
think it's just correct? Yes.
Cuomo?
Yes.
This is what I think. I think that politics is a dirty, dirty business, and I think that Andrew Cuomo probably hasn't made a lot of friends, even amongst the Democrats, and they're sick of him. And I think that it sounds to me like his long list of enemies smell blood in the water, and they're going to try to go after him. Now, they already actually had, even the Democratic group had said they were going to strip away his emergency powers, his pandemic emergency powers. But I think that there's probably a lot of people that have been waiting to get that guy. And if they can, they'll get him. He's not a nice guy. There's a couple sexual harassment suits against him as well. And I don't know if you remember, but maybe it's because I'm a woman, but if any of your female listeners, they probably caught this too. When he went on camera as part of his daily Andy Cuomo show, and he got swabbed to get the test for COVID, a woman, and I believe it was a physician, I don't even think it was a nurse, he started saying like, "Oh, you're very attractive." Like on national TV, she's coming up to his nose with the swab, and he makes like a side dirty, unprofessional comment, like, "Oh yeah," something out of the side of his mouth, like something about her attractiveness, and she looks so cute in that uniform. I'm a woman. I caught that right, and I'm a nurse, as you know, and back in my day, I got a lot of those comments too, but not from the governor on television with everyone listening. Like how lowbrow can you go?
Which kind of speaks to everything we just said about his arrogance, his obliviousness to reality, narcissism, and just being just really just a pig, right? I mean,
a pig, absolutely.
Can you imagine what he's like, at a function where there's no cameras.
I imagine he's a rotten apple. And the last thing I'll say about him, because this isn't really professional, but I don't know if you noticed this, but in one of his daily shows, he had a thin white shirt on, and you could clearly see that his nipples were pierced. And I just thought that was a little unbecoming of a governor. Everybody was talking about it. You could see the earrings through his shirt. He's a freak. That's all I'm saying.
That's a great way to end the segment.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll talk off on that one. But yeah, I mean, that's really interesting with him. So hopefully there'll be justice on that. I mean, and I will say this because you got to put yourself to me, when I put myself in the shoes of the people who were forced to go back into a situation when, for all practical purposes, knew they were going to die. That to me is unconscionable. You know what I mean? Typically, if you're in a nursing home, cost of living at that age is very difficult anyway. It's hard to find places that's going to take you, where it's going to take care of you, that you like, your friends, whatever. And then to be put out on the street and then be pushed back in there because you had to, for whatever reason, political reasons, and to basically know that you're going to high likelihood be killed from that process is just something needs to be done about that. And I think the law needs to step in and do something. For
sure. I mean, and this is the final thing I'll say too, is the people in the nursing home and their relatives felt like their families were sitting ducks. And just as a side note, the woman that was Biden appointed to some kind of health position, the one from Pennsylvania, the one that looks like a man. She's very manly looking, but I think she's a woman. She took her mother out of the nursing home just as they were shutting everything down in Pennsylvania. She went and got her mother and took her out and put her someplace else. And then made, well, as they made that rule that they had to take COVID patients back in the nursing home in Pennsylvania. So there you go.
They made exception. Well, if you have power and money and political influence, you can do for yourself, and not no one else can do it.
What do they call that? Rules for thee and not for me, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, enough about that one. What else we got?
Well, I was looking at your shirt. I see it right now. It's not a Coca-Cola shirt, but it's the same colors of it. I'm just wondering if you felt like you were just too white and to wear that shirt. I don't know.
I only wear it at my house because I'm here with white people, so we feel comfortable wearing something like that here.
How dare you be there with white people?
Well, you know.
Would that be your family?
It would be. It would be. It would be.
I'm related. You're such a terrible person, Jackie.
I know. Well, what can I say? I've been controlling your life and the life of other Black people for a long time. Yeah. Through my systemic racism. So.
Yeah. So let me fill those in who don't know about this one. Obviously, you know we're being facetious. Is that there was a drop or a leak of an internal training program at Coca-Cola. I'm not sure which headquarters or where it was. And this is being put out by not just articles, but PragerU did a video on it. So it's pretty well established that this actually happened with evidence of it happening. That essentially I guess human resources, wherever it was saying, hey, white people, you need to be less white, which means, and their definition of that is too aggressive and oppressive. And I don't remember everything about it.
Arrogant was another.
Arrogant, yes. And so all of these non-quantifiable things, what does it mean to be too arrogant? What does it mean to be, to me, this is so wrong on so many different levels. And it's one of the things that I think is just killing this country from within. I got something to say on this in a second, and my thoughts are kind of where this started. I want you to get your thought on that. Obviously, you don't agree with that.
I think that we're at the point in time where, first of all, there's so many people that have mixed background. Like it's not like everybody in this world is 100% white, 100% Black, or 100% of anything, right? So where do you draw that line, first of all? And second of all, I know too many successful people, brown people, as I like to call them, and Black people, to believe that racism is what stops people. I don't believe that. My coworkers, I have two close coworkers that are both Black women, and they both have doctorates. And one of them's husband's a dentist, and one of them's husband's a pharmacist. I don't know how they managed to find their way up there. I have friends of Black. I work in healthcare, so there's many, many, many people of color that all have nice paying jobs and more education than I do. So to me, I believe that number one, there's too many successful minorities to say that that's what the problem is, number one. Secondarily, I happen to be a woman of faith, and at my church, they say no man can stop what God has ordained. They say you are more than a conqueror. You're a victor, not a victim. And I never heard the tagline, unless you're a minority, in which case anybody gets nothing will help you. Even God can't help you, because all these white people are going to ruin your life and stop you from doing anything. So I think it's divisive. I think it's upsetting. I don't know if you remember this, but one of our first lives on the Conservative Take, I told you that white people are terrified of being called racist. And that's absolutely true. And they will go so far to avoid that moniker. And I think that what's going on now with this systemic racism and the 1619 and all this stuff is white people are buying into it because they're so afraid. They don't want it. They don't want to be that. They really don't want to be that. And they don't understand that this divisiveness and this labeling of color constantly and identifying through your color is going to make everything 10 times worse. I mean, look at, right? So if you go back into Jim Crow or slavery or anything, we have been fighting against being labeled as just a black person or, just a black woman. You want to be seen for who you really are. So why would we reverse all that and go back to identifying you primarily through your color, me or you? That's not like what grown folks do.
It's a lot of money in doing that. And we were watching a show there last night. Actually, it was the Jack Ryan show on Amazon. It's based on the Tom Clancy character, and there's a scene in there for season 1 where he's in the cab talking to a lady. She's a French. They're in France, and she says, "You in America, you have, African American, you have Hispanic American, you have Native American, you have all these hyphens. In France, you're just French." And so what is this? Is this Amazon watching? Because she's out exactly right. Whenever you divide people with that hyphen, all of a sudden you're putting people in a different category. And when I was in college, when I was in my Black militant days, we talked about the term minority, how we didn't like that because Black people aren't really minorities around the world. Black people of color, if you want to call it that, aren't minorities. But when you have it in the confines of America, all of a sudden if you're a minority, minus means less. If you're less, then you're a victim. So it's all built in that whole mentality. And what I want to say earlier was I was watching something earlier today. Also, it was the old with O.J. Simpson miniseries that came out. It was on. I think it was the miniseries that came on with.
I remember that. It was just on like maybe 5 years ago, and the guy from Friends plays the Kardashian.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty good, actually.
Yeah. It was very good. And in fact, what I thought was, what? I think this whole racial divide of this era happened at that point in time right there because they showed a split screen. Whether you believe he did it or not, doesn't matter. It's not the point. Is that people were divided. And what Cochran did, whether you want to believe like it or not, he used the race card big time to get the jury on his side. Now, in my opinion, I've always stated that the LAPD did enough to screw the case up, that the acquittal was probably the right thing to do because the case was all jacked up. But from an evidence standpoint, the prosecution had enormous amount of evidence that he did it. But the point I'm trying to make is that the race card with that and the divide in the country right there was so huge. Not to mention prior to that, more like a year before that was like Rodney King, and that just kept boiling and boiling and boiling. And then of course you had Obama who did more of that, and so
10 times worse. Yeah, 10 times worse.
Yeah, and so that's what we're seeing, and it's like, until we can come together as American, get rid of the hyphen, and identify ourselves as American first, we're all together. Do you know how many people Trump pulled into the Republican Party? He doubled the Black female vote. He got the highest percentage of Black people in the country, going back to, I think it was 40 years.
Yeah,
it was just enormous amounts of turnout that he got for support all across the board. The biggest tent the Republican Party has probably seen going back to Lincoln.
Yes. So, and by the way, I wanted to tell you, I was working in a state prison when the O.J. Simpson thing came out, and several of the inmates pointed out something to me, and I've seen it 10,000 times since then. O.J. Simpson won because of the money. So in our country, unfortunately, with our system of justice, no matter the color, it's not about the color. The color that's important is green. So it just so happens frequently that maybe minority Black and brown defendants might not have the money. But if you have the money, there's a lot of, I'm trying to think of some of the rappers. Suge Knight, is it Suge Knight? Like, he finally got in trouble now, but he did a lot of bad things before this because he had money. Yeah. And if you can get a lawyer, I mean, you can't even blame Johnny Cochran for. Lawyers are supposed to do what they have to do almost without breaking the law to get their client off. So it's about the money. It's about the money. And I've seen a lot of people get railroaded. I mean, the big joke we always say is, well, you might have been innocent on this crime, but you probably did 5 others that you would get caught for. But right. I've seen people in jail that don't speak English and their lawyer doesn't speak Spanish, and here they are in jail. So there's no way they got an adequate defense. And sometimes people are just not smart enough to work the system like other people are. So the color of justice, unfortunately, in this country for sure is green, and any other country where you have where money's involved, where you get to pay a lawyer. But I mean, I've seen a lot of quotes, and you've probably seen them too. Like, our justice system isn't perfect, but it's as close to perfect as any other justice system. You know, there's no one that's better than ours. They're all equally flawed, I would think, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I remember Kingface, rest in peace. Kingface mentioned in one of his videos was that, to your point about not having the adequate funds, he said, you know, if you're in jail, and you can't make bail. That means that you're more likely to get convicted because they're going to think no one cares about you. You don't have a family to support you. You know, you're not worth anything. So the judge is like, whatever, we're just going to throw you out. But if you had the money to, to get out, and that means you have a support system, and you've stayed out of trouble from the time you're in jail, you're arrested, to the time the trial happens, which could happen up to a year or more. You're out of trouble that entire time. That's such an advantage to a person versus being in county jail the whole time because you can't make bail. I thought that was really, really interesting and a good point that he made.
It is a good point. And by the way, so first of all, if you're in jail, you're more likely to get caught up in some nonsense, right? Because, you know, a lot of things go on. You know, jail, people always say like, oh, 3 hots in a cot, but you have to be careful in jail. And if you're not a strong and you don't have authority, you could get in a lot of trouble in jail. Somebody asks you to do one little favor, or you offend the wrong person, or who even knows what happens. The longer you're in jail, the more likely is you're going to get caught up in something sticky, number one. And number two, I mean, I used to say to my patients, because I was a nurse in jail and I worked with inmates on parole, don't go back to your house. Don't, like, you know, you're going to go back to the very same neighborhood. Maybe you can't drive because a lot of times whatever they did, they lost their license. So now how are you going to get from place to place? You can't work. You're not allowed to associate with anyone that has a criminal record. And frequently that can be everybody on your block. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you're just bound to get in trouble. I think that if you could take parolees and put them in Wisconsin or Wichita and have them like work on a farm until their parole's over, they stand a much better chance. Much better chance. It's almost impossible to not get caught up in something if you go back to your same old neighborhood. And by the way, having money, I could have someone drive. I could Uber if I had to go to work every day and I lost my license. You know what I mean? You can do other things that keep you out. I don't have to get on the bus, but you're going to get in the bus. You're going to get in the subway. You're going to be with other people that probably committed, you know, that may even be involved in your case. It's impossible. It's almost impossible to manage that parole without getting in a jam.
I know we're getting off on a tangent here, but I want to touch on the Trump administration and his not partisan, but I guess it was the justice reform, what's it called, bilateral, and where the Democrats, for the first time in a long time, came together on meaningful legislation, and then you had, along with that, you had Ice Cube, who basically brokered a deal with Trump of $500 billion for getting on the table of putting forth a program for, you know, whatever that was, the Black New Deal, whatever you want to call it. And I know there's a lot of stuff in that deal. I get all of that. I get all of that, you know, stuff, but it never happened because he didn't, you know, make it to the second term. However, you have Joe Biden promising all these things, and now he's already reneging on everything. And now we have a situation where there could have been some meaningful progress made, not only with criminal justice reform on the heels of that, but also with additional funding and things like you just talked about. There have been plenty of money to do something like you just mentioned, right? I mean, the money to take someone from, you know, Queens to Wichita, Kansas, to do work on a farm and grow something, you know, until his
learn a trade, or, you know,
right. So, you know, and that's what's really frustrating, you know, when you have someone like Trump, who to me was a glimmer of hope. It's like a spark of what it could be, and now we're seeing the contrast of what it shouldn't be. And now I think that's what I was saying in the beginning of this video, of the glimmer of hope them having, because they're left falling all over themselves. All of a sudden we're saying, oh, because there's a poll that came out about 2 weeks after the election saying that people had not voted for Biden had they known about this, had they known about this, had they known about this. And there's buyer's remorse even in the early stages. And I think we're seeing it now because you're not seeing any apologists for Biden right now. Nobody's defending the guy.
It almost feels eerie to me, like what's going on in Washington. It just feels like, I don't know, because, I mean, obviously, President Biden is not in his right mind. He sort of just totters about. He calls a lid for the weekend, like on Thursday mornings. and everybody just acts like it's like, you know, that story about the emperor's new clothes where he was naked,
Yep.
but everyone was afraid to say it. I mean, there's plenty of people on the left that are reasonable, intelligent people, and how could they not see what's going on? But what would you expect from Biden? Historically, he's not been a good friend to those that are underserved and without power. But you know what I think this really speaks to, which I didn't really realize till I moved down here and had a talk actually with your wife. So the difference between the left and the right is, honestly, it boils down to this. The right is more like, don't give me anything, but let me have the freedom to do what I need to do to take care of myself. But the left, their answer to everything is to almost treat people like a baby and just throw a couple dollars at them, you know, to get by. Even the pandemic money. What are you gonna? You haven't worked for a year, and they're gonna give you $1,400. Like, yes, I could use $1,400, but you know what would really help me? Open up my city so I can go to work and my kids can go to school and we can start putting our lives back together again. That's gonna last a lot longer than $600 or $1,400. So if you have the people on the left that just sort of seem like for every problem looking right to the government to help us, and they're going to give you, you know, your couple little ducats every month, like welfare or, you know, Section 8, all that, that's going to lock you into never having anything and a kind of a false sense of security. So now you're dependent on them. You know, it's like feeding stray cats. You're dependent on them, and they have that fear in your head, like the government doesn't give you this, you're not going to be successful, you're not going to survive. So it's really like a core mindset between the left and the right, that and everything else flows from those two mindsets, it seems like to me.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and it comes from their worldview too, which I can get into, but I won't in this video. But yeah, I mean, and I looked at it the same way, almost like the feudal system. We have monarchs, you know, and it's like, and we see it now with the Capitol building surrounded by a fence, which might as well be a moat, where the prince and the monarchs, whatever, they're behind their castle walls and the moat and all that stuff, and the people are out doing whatever. I guess those called the serfs.
Yeah.
And you know they're feeding, you know, they're doing the work, and guess who's getting the benefit from that? That's going to the people in the castle. And so it goes to a sense of well, they're entitled because they feel they're better, essentially. And whether it's better for whatever reason, they feel they're better.
And serfs are too stupid and ignorant to know what's best for them, and you have to let us decide because we're the monarchy.
Yep, exactly. So, yeah, that's sort of the deal there. And getting into that, let's talk about a little bit about integrity of election. So, I think, you know, I think the most important thing of anything we need to be focused on is that, because, again, I can't speak specifically because you have certain rules. I'm not trying to get this thing taken off, whatever, for no reason, but I can't talk about election integrity. How can we make the election? And I have some ideas on this, but what do you think we can do?
Well, I think
that make elections more.
You can talk about it as long as you're forward facing, right? So I think what we need to do is the mail-in ballots is that they have to go. And I know that, you know, California has had mail-in ballots for a long time. And I read somewhere that there's a bill up, but I don't think it sounds like it's even close to passing yet, where they're trying to make the whole country have the same voting rules as California. But I think that we need to go to voter ID in person on the day of, or except for unless your state has early voting. I mean, just do what Florida did. If every other state, I mean, and I'd add the ID in there. And I think that, you know, a lot of things that happen in this country we complain about, but what did we do about it? What did we do about Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi being in office for 50 years and coming out almost billionaires? You know, or Joe Biden before he was even vice president, 47 years. There's a lot of people and there's a lot of pork, and that's all of our fault. I think, you know, the conventions of states, I joined them a while ago. We need to really mobilize and do something about voter integrity and term limits. And until the elections are secure, almost nothing else matters, because if they can, if there's fraud and malfeasance at that level, you know, who knows who's ever going to win? Why did we allow a foreign company to be in control of our electronic voting? Why did we, like who was behind the, and don't forget, like Texas refused that company, right? They couldn't get a contract with Texas. Correct. So what happened elsewhere? What were we doing? We really need to step it up, and we need to get on the phone, and you need to go to meetings for your particular party, whether you're left or right. There's no way we're all going to sit at the house and go, did they fix that yet? That's not going to work. We all have to take a little bit of action.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right there about the accountability falls on the American people, because they never should have gotten this far. I mean, there's been PBS did a dossier. They did I forget the word for it, but they did a piece on this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Expose maybe a few years ago, dealing with the machines, the menu machines, and the potentiality of it, and how the guy hacked it. And there's another one where a gentleman went to University of Ohio. Well, he went to Ohio State. This is hilarious. He rigged the machines. I mean, it's all on whatever, where he basically said, who do you like better, Michigan State or Ohio State? At Ohio State University, they're still union. Guess what? Michigan won by a landslide. And people are like, I can't believe that happened, right? Yeah, because he rigged it. And he showed you how I did it. And so we knew about this. So to your point, we need to be actively involved in this and not take no for an answer. I've said also we can take responsibility by scrubbing some of these voter rolls. The Democrats have no problem scrubbing our rolls. We need to do the same thing. We need to go there, on these off number years, these odd number years, and take them to task on that. Freedom of Information Act, take advantage of that, and make sure that we understand. I think that's hopefully what's going to happen. Now, in an ideal situation, I'm going to say this right now because I don't care. Trump loses 2020, right? 2024, he runs again, and then he runs in 2028, right? So he gets 12 years versus getting 8 years. So
if you have a break in their presidential time, you can actually serve 3 terms.
We can serve. You can. It's a second. Yes, you. If, like, for instance, like, let's say, because this happened once before, Grover Cleveland. He ran, and then he ran one term, and he also came back, I think, 4 years later and ran again. But he never got reelected. But he could have gotten reelected the second time.
Right, but I'm saying, after FDR, we made the law that you could only serve 2 terms. So they must mean in a row. If you're saying that Trump could come back in 24 and in 28, he'll serve a total of 3 terms.
Correct. Not saying he would, but I guess what I'm saying is that those 2, we need time and place to get this stuff going so it can be fixed. It's not going to, 4 years is not long enough to drain the swamp.
You're right.
Whether or not Trump comes back in 2024 is really irrelevant. We need someone like a DeSantis who's going to fulfill the mantle, right? It doesn't matter if it's Trump or not. Trump would be perfect because he's got the experience. He'd win in a shoe-in if we had what we talked about before.
And another thing is, I mean, really, both political parties, their bench lineup is horrible. Well, I think the Republicans now are a little bit better, but we should be grooming people right now to be senators and governors and work their way up to the presidency. I mean, I don't know. So you got Ron DeSantis, maybe Matt Gaetz could have a national. The governor of South Dakota, everybody, they love her. And you know what? She's not in our party, but Tulsi Gabbard almost could be somebody that I wouldn't cry if she was the president. I feel. Oh, forgot. Please. But there are some people that are speaking truth, but you have to be grooming now to get them in there, or it's going to be the same rehash. I mean, the swamp is terrible, and I would say right now is the swampiest the swamp has ever been. If you look at who's being nominated for different cabinet positions and stuff, it's really basically Obama's team being recycled. But some of them have done some really like that. There's some of them that have some very unfortunate activities for the past 8 years and indicate they are nothing but beholden to big business or Wall Street or tech or whoever. It's the swampiest I've ever seen it. It's pretty bad. and that's our fault.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think two things concern me. I don't care about the swamp being what it is and all that stuff going on. That doesn't concern me as much as the influence in China in our political system and our economy. That's huge to me, and also the factor of the whole culture that we have here of this counterculture thing, where this not sorry cancel culture, where we can't speak our minds, whatever. It's the fundamental breakdown of the Constitution that I'm afraid of, because, and I probably shouldn't say this, probably caused this video not to be monetized. I'll frame it this way. Hypothetically speaking, if you have an election that doesn't go well, and you have people who ignore the constitutional checks and balances to protect us from that. We have governors, you have election boards, you have state legislators that don't abide by it. You have Supreme Court justices who just pass it off and say a state like, let's say, just make up a name. Let's say Texas doesn't have authority to sue other states because they don't have grounds, because they don't have. If that were to happen in real life, that would be a problem.
Well, there's a lot of constitutional things that are being overlooked. I mean, and you saw it coming.
I'm sorry.
You saw it coming in the debate when they asked, I think they asked Joe Biden about gun control, and he goes, well, you can't do that by executive order. You know, it's against the Constitution. And Kamala Harris said, can't you just say, yes, we can, Joe? Can't you just say, yes, we can? Like, in other words, his negative attitude about the whole Constitution thing. But I think that the cancel culture is really interesting, because I'm just curious how it's all going to play out. So most people are not listening to network news anyway, right? But it's almost like we're creating two systems side by side for conservatives to speak on our system and have social media over here, and then liberals have their whole system over here, which they have Twitter, you know, they have the mainstream media, they have Facebook. Now we have Parler. I took my Facebook out of my phone. I still have an account on my computer every couple of weeks. Matter of fact, people have been messaging me, how come you're not on Facebook anymore? I think that we're going to have to create our own places to talk, because we're not allowed to talk in all the other places. And right. It's a shame, but I think it's only, I mean, we can't be silenced. We can't just have no voice at all. And I hope that, you know, maybe someday we will have a unifier. We don't have a unifier right now, but, you know, what else can we do? Well, I mean, somebody in a leadership position that truly is unifying the right and the left, because I think there are some common grounds. It used to be we were all Americans, but that's when he opens the border and lets 25,000 migrants in unchecked, but you can't go to Florida on a plane without a COVID vaccination. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's all upside down. But we used to all at least think like Americans, and I'm sure there's some issues somewhere that we could all have some common ground and start there. But the way things are going with the calls to execute Trump, you know, the deprogramming camps, all that nonsense, which I don't believe is a lot of people, but when they talk about it, it just inflames all of us and gets us all so outraged again. I'm sure I'm not the only person. Like, I don't even want to hear from anybody on the left right now, unless you can go back to like 2016 and start apologizing for everything that's happened since 2016 and everything that we have been through as conservatives, and then work your way up to what happened all the last 6 months. Otherwise, we have nothing to talk about, because if you can't admit all that was wrong, well, you know, what do we have to talk about? Right. What happened? Yeah, what happened? It's nothing, right? There's nothing there, because it's all baloney unless you see things for how they truly were for us for the past. I mean, you know, I didn't even like President Trump when he was running. I had been a Democrat, but for 35 years, but I couldn't stand Obama. But you know what made me start liking Trump? At the very beginning, I could see the media wasn't fair with him. And when I see stuff like that, like, I'm always rooting for the underdog. And I could see how they badmouthed him and how they twisted his words and how they twisted situations. And then I saw that one time they were coming on stage for the debate and he stopped and waited for Dr. Carson.
Yeah.
I saw that on TV and I was like, wait a minute, this guy is not all bad. And then, of course, the more they bashed him, the more I liked him. And then, of course, I was happy with almost everything he did in office. But,
Yep.
I mean, they almost created Donald Trump by the way the media treated him. And it's been completely unfair. And that's nothing that I don't think I can get over anytime soon.
Yeah, it's the meme of the battered wife. It's the meme of the battered wife, and this is I'm trying to make light of this because that's a horrible thing. Whoever does that is terrible. But it's almost like, oh, I'm sorry, honey, I did all this to you. Now let's unite. You know that the left has literally pummeled this country to a pulp, and now once they got their way, all of a sudden they want to reconcile and unite. And that's, to me, it's just an added insult to the injury.
It is actually one more thing.
So, and in terms of a unifier, I can't think of anyone right now who could be that way, because everything is, if the media was honest in how they deliver stuff, then there's tons of unifiers out there, right?
I agree with you. You're right. You're right.
But they will never call it the way it is. You know, the sky is blue. Nope, I'm sorry, it's not blue. And that's what's really the most frustrating thing. So that's probably the third thing that I have an issue with: the China influence in our country and other countries for that matter. The breakdown in our culture as it pertains to the Constitution and the ignoring of it, and lastly has to do with this whole thing what I just mentioned. So
yeah, but you know, the China thing is really scary, and that's another, people that are going to the cabinet and other high positions have long-term ties to the CCP. Matter of fact, I made a little note. You know, the PPE bill, that I guess it was the last one, the PPE, whatever it's called, the pandemic bill, they gave the Wuhan Institute $750,000. I can't imagine anything sicker. I can't imagine. But I am scared about the China. Why in the world did they open up our power grid, which is another one of Biden's executive orders? He gave the Chinese access to our power grid. Yeah.
And Trump had stopped that early on, actually.
Of course. That sounds like, doesn't that sound like a future movie of how how China took over America? They had access to the power grid. You know, you could put a country on its knees.
And here's the interesting thing. I'm not trying to get to the tinfoil hat, but Texas has its own power grid, right? So if any state could really be self-sufficient, it's Texas, because the power grid goes over various states, whatever. There's several ones, and Texas has their own one. And for Texas to go down like it is very disconcerting, because they have their energy. They have the energy, but from what I understand, they saw this coming, asked the Biden administration for relief for them to do clean coal, fossil fuels, natural gas, and they were denied. And then this thing happened, and then you have people literally dying from this.
Yeah, that is a little scary, but I'm not really exactly sure. But they had those wind turbines for a long time, obviously, because they were built in the past. I don't know why. Well, I don't know what happened, but I think more needs to be revealed. I did read that because of the power, the desperate need for power, that the companies were gouging people, and they were going to get like $5,000 and $10,000 heat or electric bills from this storm. So they're going to have to figure it all out. But you know what? Of all the states for this to happen to, Texas is probably the best one, because that governor will figure it out and get it done. And those people still have the spirit to be free and independent and get themselves done. I mean, when they were talking about seceding from the union, I was thinking of packing my bags.
Well, like I said, I was about to say, they're one state that could, from a logistics standpoint, they would be the one that could do it quicker than anyone else. I kind of digress with my statement there about the power grid and the windmills, but the whole thing with China is, when I remember when that executive order came out with Trump stopping it, he basically put forth an emergency, like, this is bad, and it's like, we need to stop this. And I don't know what China's ambitions are, but we do know in the South China Sea they're doing a lot of bad things with the neighbors in Australia, Japan. The rest of the world really does not like.
They're trying to take Taiwan back.
Yeah, and before the deadline, even. So they have a deadline that put forth. I think that was Thatcher put forth. But they're trying to come in there and supersede that. And who knows what their ambitions are. And it's really, really disconcerting when you have a commander in chief who doesn't seem to care, or may even be in bed with them.
I,
So
I don't think he even understands it. So, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Nixon went to China. I mean, I was pretty young. I wasn't into politics, but I remember it was a bit kind of a big deal. My parents talking about it. But I think that in that age group, so like if you say from 1980 to 2000, China was just like it's cool. Oh, everybody can go over that. You weren't really scared of it. We were still scared of Russia. And
sure.
that communist stuff. But I mean, they've slowly snuck in and done so many things with like putting things in the computer parts so they can spy and malware. They have way too much of our business. I won't own an iPhone because I don't want to be responsible for another slave putting it together. We all know they use slave labor. We know what they're doing with the Uyghur Muslims. I read several different places that they're collecting DNA because they're trying to develop a biological weapon against a particular group of people. That's what they're doing. They must think they're going to rule the world. And then poor Hong Kong. Did I lose you? Well, we seem to have lost Kyle. Kyle? I think we're still on. This might be technical difficulties. Well, folks, obviously, Kyle's having a malfunction. I'm going to sign off and then maybe we'll come back on. We have talked for an hour and we have plenty more to say, but if he comes back, we'll be back. Thank you.
Well, it looks like my broadcast stopped. My phone is now my main primary device. So unfortunately, we're going to end this broadcast right here because my system crashed for whatever reason. So thank you, Jackie, for having me on. And I want to let everyone know that if you want to continue to support this channel, then please click that join button so you can find out how to do that. And also, if you want to just share this video, and that'd be also great as well. Now, things like this is live, so things like this happen. But we were pretty much finished the conversation. So I want to again thank Jackie for coming on, and thank you for watching. And we will do this again soon. And watch out for other content that we're going to have launching pretty soon. All right. So thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time.